So we want to especially welcome today our speaker, Christopher West. Christopher is a partner and director of government relations and grassroots outreach at Jackson West Consulting. He has become a trusted advisor to us here at the Chamber as part of our public policy committee as well. Jackson West is a national, bipartisan government relations, public affairs, and grassroots consulting firm specializing in the business and politics of government. And as you all know, we are facing a lot of challenges with reopening our economy after the last year. And we know that a lot of you have a lot to say and want to have your voice heard. And one of the specific legs of the Chamber of Commerce is to be an advocate for our members and collect your voice and help you get your voice heard, not only at the local and state level, but regionally and as necessary federally. And so today we want to be talking about how to get your voice heard. And so without further ado, I want to give Christopher the opportunity to jump in here and guide us through some of this process and how we can help to strengthen the voice here at the top of Virginia. So Christopher, please take it away.
Thank you, Cynthia. Appreciate that. I mean, yeah, folks, this is basically what we do each and every day here at Jackson West. As Cynthia mentioned, we're a bipartisan firm, so we work on both sides of the aisle. For the most part, what I plan on doing is just running through sort of a quick PowerPoint here and then just opening it up for questions here towards the end. So let me put my technical hat on here and see if I can do a share screen. All right, so we're going to burn through here these slides. So as Cynthia mentioned, we're a local, state, and federal government relations firm. So we really focus here just real quickly on three sort of main areas of sort of I use the term expertise very, very loosely. So we sort of stumble and find our way as we go along. One of our main areas of focus here is local government relations, which I'll spend a decent amount of time probably focusing on here today. We mainly work on controversial local land use, zoning and rezoning projects. So anything that basically gets folks fired up for the most part and turns folks out. You may have seen just this past week and a half at the county level in Frederick County, you had about 200 residents show up for an industrial development there on 50 East. The old Carpers Valley Golf Club. So a lot of issues similar to that, projects that have a zoning application before either a city council, a town council, or a board of supervisors that they feel in some way, shape, form is going to be controversial. Typically, they'll bring us on board a few months in advance and help us do some organization on the ground to find those folks that support that particular application. So there, I've got a few examples. We've done power plants, casinos, large planned residential development, cell phone towers. My gosh, cell phone towers alone keep us in business here and keep the lights on. Everyone wants full bars on their cell phone, but nobody wants that tower in their backyard. So we do a lot of cell tower work, small cells, especially in the higher populated areas like Northern Virginia, Richmond, and Hampton Roads. Pipelines, gosh, you guys, probably see all the time. There's always a fight over a pipeline someplace. Hotels, hospitals, data centers, industrial parks, sort of you name it, folks. We've done it really at the local level. That includes a lot of tax initiatives. So, restaurant owners on here, we worked fighting increases to meals tax. If you're a convenience store owner or a grocery store, we have fought cigarette tax initiatives. Any business, we fought B-poll initiatives to raise B-poll. Admissions taxes, if you own a theater, we've also fought those as well. Another sort of leg of our three-legged stool here is state government relations. We do direct government lobbying, of course, in Virginia. That's only 45 or 60 days every even odd year. So we go down to Richmond and we lobby the members of the General Assembly, again, on sort of a wide variety of issues. Similarly, at the federal level, we do direct government lobbying, although we're mainly focused on Virginia's congressional members. So our members of the House of Representatives and our members here of the Senate. What we sort of do is we tweak it a little bit. So we do federal sort of public affairs. So you have a lobbyist in D.C. that goes and meets with that particular member of Congress or that senator, and they meet with them on an issue and they find out, sort of where are the pressure points on that particular issue. What are things that they like and what are things that they don't like. That lobbyist will then hire our firm to go into that, if it's a congressional member, into that district, or if it's Senator Warner or Senator Kaine, to go statewide, and similarly find those voices that either stand to benefit or stand to be impacted negatively from a particular piece of legislation, depending upon what side of the aisle our particular client falls on that particular legislative issue. So we'll then go find, again, like voices, either for or against, and ensure that those voices reach out to our congressional members and our federal delegation as a whole, and voice, again, sort of their either concerns or their support for a particular issue. The great thing about these sort of three areas of focus that we have is they kind of move up and down the ladder. We're able to activate folks at the local level to engage on state level issues and federal level issues. And likewise, we're able to get folks that are more concentrated on federal level issues sometimes to sort of top down, get involved in some state government issues and even sometimes some local government issues. So for us, public affairs is really what our firm does, more so than necessarily government relations. And it gives sort of a brief definition here, but it really talks about the relationship between you and me, us just sort of average citizens, small business owners, mid-sized business owners, and how we sort of interact with government. And that's why at our firm, our sort of saying is the business and politics of government, because we really talk about the business of government and how government impacts business. So at the local level, again, I'll sort of focus a little bit of the presentation today more on the local level here, and even generally give some examples that you all should be familiar with just from reading the newspaper or following the Winchester City Council or Frederick or Clark Board of Supervisors. So, of course, the main thing here is simply to stay informed, right? And you can do that in a multitude of different ways. A lot of that now is transitioned mostly to online news or even cable news, unfortunately, and sort of the good old-fashioned newspaper, if you will, as sort of pushed off to the side here. You don't see quite a bit of news necessarily coming, or more. It's more after the fact, if you will. Whereas a lot of the online news is sort of a bit more in real time. So one of the things we talk about, like at the local land use level, to sort of stay informed, is to again, in the newspaper, you'll see sort of monthly, the Winchester Star will post real estate transactions, right? So you can kind of see who's selling, who's buying, and you can kind of pick out, especially if you know some of the larger developers, like on the residential side or even the commercial side, and you can kind of get an inkling of the direction that maybe some parcels might be heading. Similarly, you'll see official notices posted. Again, these can be in newspapers. Typically, your city or county governments will sort of hide these in the way back, buried in the classified section. Or again, you'll see postings at City Hall or government buildings. And again, they sort of just post these up. It always seems to be in the basement, right under the stairs. Never really sort of out and about for folks to sort of see, whether that's purposely or not. Of course, if you're driving past a large parcel, sometimes you'll see a big sign, right, that says that a public hearing or that a rezoning has been initiated. You can certainly reach out to your economic development office and get some updates there with regards to things that are coming and going. Obviously, sort of a little bit later down the timeline, you'll see things pop up on a planning commission, city council, or board meeting agenda. And at this point, the application has essentially been filed with the entity, the locality, and is now starting to move sort of through the more formal process. HOA letters, sometimes you've got a good HOA management company. I know that doesn't apply to a lot of folks necessarily in Winchester, Frederick, and Clark, because there aren't a ton of HOAs, but in some of your larger localities, those HOAs and those management companies will also keep you informed of things that are impacting the neighborhood. And then, of course, you have the good old-fashioned, word of mouth. You just sort of hear people talking about, again, land and development, things that are sort of coming and going. So sort of a 200, I know we're talking about this is sort of a 100 level sort of course, but sort of a 200 level course, and just to sort of maybe take it a little bit of a next step, is to kind of, obviously you want to understand local zoning. So you want to understand that process. You want to understand how that process is going to impact or how that application is going to move through the process. And then, of course, how it's going to impact you. I was going to post a couple of the other comprehensive plans here. Really, the only one in our particular region that has one that's really forward-looking is Frederick County. I can share, this presentation with everyone. There's a link embedded there. So Frederick County has a 2035 comp plan. The comp plan is really sort of a good look into the future, right? As far as what localities want to do and where they want to do it. You can see where they have like planned commercial and industrial development, where residential's planned in areas that are going to stay rural, and areas again that are sort of earmarked kind of for the future for heavier development or maybe denser development. The big things, obviously, that we're all aware of are some of the big projects, right? I mean, some of the no-brainers that we're all sort of aware of. We all know that I-81 is going to be expanded going through Winchester. Obviously, that's going to have an impact quite a bit. Now, is that going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Maybe VDOT doesn't get around to funding it until 20 years from now. But still, you're sort of getting out in front and understanding that, that I-81 expansion is going to have, a pretty big impact, especially on, the parcels that are located at each and every one of those exits, essentially starting, down in Middletown and heading up through to the West Virginia line. Although the expansion, at least as it's proposed now, is not that quite that lengthy. Also, the Route 37 bypass completion. I mean, my gosh, we've been talking about this since I was probably in daycare in Winchester. But eventually, again, understanding that, that's a big project. Eventually, that loop is going to be completed, and it's going to sort of, head out past Stevens City, loop around, Winchester Regional Airport, connect out there by Harley-Davidson, someplace on 50, skip over to Route 7, and then eventually come back around and connect to Stone Bridge Boulevard. Again, those are some huge parcels out in that particular part of the county. I'm sure a lot of those landowners are probably sitting back waiting for the day that this project actually becomes a reality, understanding that, again, those parcels are certainly going to gain quite a bit in value. But how is that going to impact those folks that are already living out that way, those folks that might already be there in those areas? And then, of course, you look way down the road. And one of the stats, I like to share with folks here is, sort of our relationship, given the proximity to Northern Virginia and Loudoun County. We're only Clark County sort of away from Loudoun. But if you look at Loudoun County and just the enormous growth that they've experienced here over the past 30 years, and understand that for the most part, that growth is coming our way. Hopefully, not in quite the wave that it has or the speed at which it has in Loudoun. But if you look at the similarities here, 30 years ago, Loudoun County had the same population that we have, was the 15th largest in Virginia. I ask a lot of folks, there's 130, 135, localities in Virginia. Where do you think Frederick County sits population-wise? And most folks think we're somewhere in the middle, not understanding that we're actually the 14th largest by population in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And certainly that's projected to grow and grow, fairly quickly here, I think, over the next decade or so. The key really, and sort of getting into the crux, the meat of this entire Lunch and Learn is, how to make your voice heard. And really it comes down to of knowing, first, that timeline, and again, understanding that process. So I sort of outlined here, how just a local land use application would move through. And for the most part, this is generally the same process throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And actually, we do quite a bit of local land use work in other states as well. And again, generally, it sort of follows this kind of rough outline, if you will. So understanding, again, that process and the different milestones, and that's why I sort of draw out and say, be aware of milestones, is you're working towards particular dates. You're working towards particular actions, things that are going to occur that are either going to provide, obstacles in the road of that particular maybe piece of legislation or that particular or application, or opportunities, for you to either, get passage or again, get potentially a vote of denial for that application. But it's understanding and working sort of towards those milestones. So a couple of I say, get involved early. So a couple of the tactics, right, like building up to those milestones are, again, things that I think generally that we're all aware of. So some of this stuff is sort of a no-brainer. Obviously, putting in phone calls and voicing either your support or displeasure for a particular application. sending an email again to that member, whether it be the board member or the council member, or the town council member, whomever it might be, congressional member, your state delegate, your state senator, sending letters to those members as well. Letters can be from an individual, they can be from a group, they can be from a coalition. Intercepts, finding the opportunities, to actually meet with these folks, whether that be you reaching out to them and having a formal meeting with them in their office, or, hey, everybody's heading to the Frederick County Fair this weekend. You might see Blaine Dunn, right? Or you might see the mayor of the city out there, and taking the opportunity when you run into those folks to be able to, again, to voice your support or your displeasure with a particular application. Some of the bigger things and things a lot that we push are, obviously, you want to get into sort of building. You want to find other folks, like-minded folks that support your same position, right? So voicing your support publicly through like a letter to the editor or an op-ed is, again, a great way to start sort of spreading the word, if you will. Obviously, there's strength in numbers, right? And many hands make light work. There's all sorts of sayings that talk about again, that organization, building sort of that coalition, and that's going to be a heck of a lot more impactful than, say, you simply as an individual. We also do a lot of earned media events, and that's something else you can think of. And again, an earned media event might be a business roundtable that's focused on a specific issue. Host other businesses that are similar to yours and talk about how a particular regulatory action, legislative action, or maybe it is something as simple as a local application is going to impact your business, impact the ability for you to do to do work, maybe impact your employees, maybe impact the taxes that you pay. So holding those business roundtables and even inviting not just the press and the media, since this is under earned media, but also inviting those decision makers, those folks that are actually taking that action or voting on that action, that's going to impact you or your business. Similarly, a business tour, you can do a good old-fashioned press conference, or if you really want to get crazy, don't storm the Capitol, but you can hold a rally, right? We've all learned storming the Capitol is not the smartest thing to do. And then, of course, you have the paid media function, which is Facebook is great. For $5, you can blast out your message to like 500 people. It's the economy of scale there is and the bang for the buck is through the roof if you're doing some digital ads. TV ads obviously get a heck of a lot more expensive. If you've got a budget to do that, then you're really as part of a much bigger coalition and a much bigger issue. Here in Virginia, TV in Northern Virginia is astronomical in price. Richmond, it's fairly high. Hampton Roads, it's fairly high. In the Shenandoah Valley, you can actually get TV3 in Harrisonburg and a few of the more local regionalized channels are for the most part affordable, again, in comparison to like the DC MSA. And then, of course, you have good old-fashioned radio as well to do radio ads. In making phone calls to individuals, whether, again, that be a congressional member's office or whether that be, again, one of the board of supervisors in Clark County or a city council in the city of Winchester, you typically want to have, your talking points handy. You want to have thought about that issue and be able to speak, again, specifically on how that issue is going to impact you. A lot of times we'll even help individuals or coalitions, groups, organizations, associations, even prepare a script that they can then share with their membership. That script, again, also sort of focuses down and drills down, as I mentioned earlier, those pressure points, right? So if there is a particular member on a board of supervisors that has a specific concern about an application or a specific concern about some regulatory action, we want to make sure that we concentrate all our fire on that specific concern, right? There might be 100 different ways that particular bill or ordinance might impact you. But if there's one of those 100 that also that board member or again, that state delegate is also sort of seeing eye to eye with you, you really want to pounce on that particular issue and again, try to drive that issue home. So you want to create sort of that steady drumbeat across your coalition. So it's sort of smart to prepare a bit of a script to keep those members of your coalition sort of focused and on message. We also talk about sharing, your personal story. This is where you get off script. And this is, again, where you want to talk about how specifically, this particular item might impact you, and not just you as the individual, but you as the business you own, you as the employees that you have, you as the taxes you pay. And again, sort of a more sort of all around, impact on you and why this particular thing is either good or or is bad. And again, the broader that you can then make that message, and again, sharing that message across a broader coalition, the more impactful it's going to be on that particular member. We talk about emails and letters to members. Again, you want to know who you're addressing. We talk about, are you talking to the member directly like you would be on the city council or board level, or are you talking to a senior staffer like a legislative director or a chief of staff or a deputy chief of staff? So you want to understand who it is and what power that particular individual has over the issue itself. If they're not the individual that's actually voting, right, like a legislative director might be, or a policy, let's say legislative analyst or a policy director might be, you can tend to get a bit more in the weeds on a particular topic, on a particular issue. In that letter, you also want to address, when you send that in the very first paragraph, why it is you're reaching out to those folks. You want to personalize and customize it, no different than we talked about with the phone calls that we make. Again, how it impacts you. One of the things we have a lot of sort of old school clients want to do, they want to do these form letters, right? Where they want, everyone in the Chamber of Commerce to send the exact same letter worded the exact same way into these congressional offices. That's very 80s, that's very 90s. When I worked on the Hill, when we saw form letters rolling in via the fax machine, for those of you that still have a fax machine, we would typically put the trash can right under the fax machine, right? We would take the first letter off, we would note that first letter, and then we would just simply count off the rest. So if I'm sending a letter, I want that congressional member to see it. I want them to see my name. I want them to see my business. I don't want to be one of 100 or one of 500 or gosh, sometimes at the federal level, one of tens of thousands of letters that some of these congressional offices are receiving. So you want to personalize that letter. You really want to customize that letter. Again, you want to sort of embellish who you are, right? Certainly anyone that's on this particular Lunch and Learn, if you're sending a letter, you want to mention that, hey, I'm a member of the Top of Virginia Chamber of Commerce, right? You want to flex sort of that muscle. You want to talk about the organizations that you're a part of, because again, that makes your letter, your perspective a bit more impactful if they know that you're someone that's involved in your chamber or involved in your community. We talk about snail mail, over email, again, understanding those milestones, just giving that, especially with the state of the current USPS, giving that enough time to make sure that it's delivered ahead of, again, that milestone. We have a lot of folks that deliver a lot of stuff, snail mail, and we get word from the congressional offices that, we received 500 letters on your topic 2 days after we voted on it. That did no good. That had no impact whatsoever. So certainly something to be aware of. Talk about LTEs and op-eds. Generally, just know your word limit. LTEs, but more or less every paper throughout the Commonwealth, they usually about 300, 350 words is the limit. Op-eds are usually 700, 750 words per limit. You can submit those through an online submission form. I hate online submission forms. For most newspapers, you can find a staff directory. You can submit it through that online submission form, but you typically want to follow up with that opinion page editor to ensure that one, that your op-ed or your LTE was indeed received. And then two, you want to sort of ask them and sort of, again, put the ball in their court. When is it going to run? Is it accepted and when it's going to run? Again, I recommend sort of doing both. Another thing that typically you'll see these folks ask is it exclusive to my newspaper? So again, we've had some clients that have written op-eds and they have sent the op-ed to 30 newspapers in Virginia, and they sent it all at the exact same time, carbon copying, CCing every single newspaper. These newspapers will never print an op-ed typically like that. They want to know it's exclusive to them. They want to know that there's one copy that you submitted it to them, and that when they run it, that same op-ed's not going to run in 15 other papers across the Commonwealth. So typically you want to include in your message to that opinion page editor, hey, this is yours and yours alone. If you don't want it, I'll go someplace else, but just know that I've just submitted it simply to you. And again, kind of a catch here is you'll want to ask, is it going to run in the traditional paper? Is it going to run online only? Or is it going to run in both? I would argue in this day and age, online only is actually more effective than in the newspaper is going to be. Why? Because it creates a link. That link you can then share with other people in your coalition. They can then share with other folks. Similarly, you can post that to your Facebook account, your Twitter account, your Instagram account. And again, you get a much, much broader audience versus if you're cutting that bad boy out in paper, running to Kinko's, making 500 copies of it, and then snail mailing it out to all your friends and family, it's just not quite as effective. So online only is really probably the big push that we have for our clients, because again, we like to share that across the coalition and amongst everyone. I'll end sort of here with sort of keys to success. Certainly getting to know your elected officials much easier at the local level than it is even at the state, and certainly at the congressional level. But do take advantage of those opportunities when those state folks are in town, or especially when the federal delegation is in town, or even take the opportunity to go down to Richmond for a day during legislative session. Set up meetings with your specific representatives. Or go up to DC and do the same. Set up meetings with your particular representatives. 9 times out of 10, they will take those meetings. So just simply getting to know those folks, again, makes your voice a little bit more louder and a little bit more powerful. I say, be a YIMBY before you're a NIMBY. So a NIMBY is a not in my backyard, which is someone that essentially opposes whatever it might be, because it impacts them, their property value, their sightline, their view of the Shenandoah Mountains, whatever it might be. You always see, especially at the local level, folks show up all the time to oppose stuff. Folks rarely ever show up to support anything. So when you have an application, as we saw, whether it was a week and a half ago, whether it was the aquatic center, or whether it's a large residential development, whether it's an industrial development, 200 people, 500 people, 50 people, 20 people will show up to oppose efforts. But when there's something good coming to the community, something that's going to maybe create, good jobs, good high-paying jobs, whether it's something that's going to, bring, a multitude of jobs, 100 jobs, 200, 300 jobs. It's something that maybe is going to pay $1 million in taxes every year. No one ever shows up to say, hey, that's great. Hey, that's awesome, man. Just think what we can do with that money. So again, I propose, try to be a person that's consistent, that if you're going to show up and you're going to oppose, a particular item, first get out and try to come in and support those items. And again, your voice will be recognized, and you'll be supported if again, you're sort of playing both sides of that ball versus always being someone that's showing up saying no, essentially to everything. As I mentioned, you want to start early in the process. You want to build a coalition of like-minded stakeholders. You want to broaden sort your group, again, to give you that strength. Add third-party validation. A lot of times, folks come in and say, again, this is bad, or this is going to impact me. Getting sort of a third-party validation, an entity that maybe doesn't necessarily have a direct stake in the game as you or your business might have, but someone to come in and say, what this person is saying, they're right. They're accurate. Their statistics are correct. The way they've broken down this legislation, they're doing it properly. This is exactly how it will impact them. That third-party validation is certainly great to have. As I mentioned, you want to deploy those tactics that we mentioned, deploy them quickly, deploy them in abundance, certainly. And then, of course, know when to dial up and dial down the pressure. There are a lot of folks that oversell, and a lot of times, we're in a good spot. We've got, whether it be the numbers in a committee to get a particular bill out, or we have the numbers on the floor to get a particular bill passed. And a lot of times, folks will keep selling. And when you're already in sort of an advantageous position. So know when to sort of dial up, your activity, and also know, though, equally when to dial it down, and just sort of let the process roll through. Know that you're in a good spot, be confident that you're in a good spot, and don't sort of undo a lot of that great work that you did. And then I mentioned just build to a spectacular finale. Whatever it might be. Again, there's that critical moment where that vote is going to come. It's going to be up. It's going to be down. All that work that you put in 30 days, 3 months, 3 years ahead of that, all has to come to that big moment. If that's, again, similar to what we saw, a week and a half ago, if that's 150, 200 people all showing up, all wearing red shirts, right? All have the same message, same billboard. Everyone has their 2 minutes that they get to speak, all written out, ready to go. You want to build to that big finale and ensure that you're influencing that decision at its most impactful moment. Now, as we've seen, and I'll kind of sort of go off script here, as that's sort of the end of my presentation there. Again, I referenced now a couple of times the a week and a half ago, I had 200 residents show up and speak in opposition to that industrial development at the Old Carpers Valley. Well, that particular development actually passed, right? So despite 200 people showing up, all of them, complaining and saying, this is awful, we should not do this, let's move forward. The board still said, you know what, it's the greater good of the county, this is a great project. You also have situations where you had like Discount Tire, for example, where you had actually more folks, I think, showed up in support of that particular project. And I think it was only 2 or 3 people actually said, adjacent property owners, that, hey, these impact wrenches are going to be too loud. They're going to impact our business and to deny it. So again, you actually had more people show up in support of a particular project than you did just the 2 or 3 folks that showed up in opposition. And yet that particular project failed, right? Discount Tire, obviously, the Texas Roadhouse there on 50 still sitting vacant, not collecting any revenue for the county. So, to say there's, a silver bullet, there is a specific process or specific plan that's going to work each and every time. There just isn't. And a lot of times it's just simply a crapshoot, but you certainly feel better about your chances when you're putting forth that effort in an organized way, when you're activating that coalition, those folks around that particular issue, again, on a timeline, in an informed way, and you do everything that you can to influence the system. But obviously, folks, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, both behind the scenes, as well as, a lot of just the mindsets of those folks that have had that decision-making power that's just going to always, for whatever reason, go sort of against the grain and against, you're not going to win them all, I guess I should say. We've certainly lost a few local land use projects and state legislative issues that we just thought were no-brainers, and we were baffled by the fact that we were on the losing side. So, with that, again, there's no perfect plan, and certainly no way to predict really the outcome. Although, again, you feel much better going in to a project knowing that you did everything you could, either in support or in opposition to it, and you didn't leave anything on the table. So, with that, again, that's kind of a really, really, really quick. Actually took longer than I thought. A really quick overbrief of sort of what we do. For the most part, though, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. I've got a multitude of specific examples I can use. So feel free to either post something in the chat or simply raise your hand, and we can recognize you.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to quickly pop up Christopher's contact information if you have questions afterwards or looking for advice for your organization. Here is his personal information at work. And then we will also make sure that this recording is available to you. Before, we want to give Christopher a moment to catch his breath. That was a lot of information, but really valuable, Christopher. Thank you. But I want to say thank you to our sponsors, particularly for today. Overall, it's because of our sponsors' investment into the chamber and the community that allows us the wherewithal to do these. And particularly today, I want to thank Cardinal Technology Solutions. I think, Les, you're on here still. Thanks so much for being the sponsor of today's Lunch Bunch. We did have one question that came up in the chat, and that was whether you think a handwritten or a typed letter is more effective, Chris?
Who writes anything by hand anymore? If I was a decision maker and I received a handwritten letter, absolutely I would be impressed beyond belief. I can't even scribble out a check hardly anymore, let alone put together a couple of sentences in a letter. I would offer you probably want to type it out. And again, because it's something that digitally it's going to be easier for you also to share, especially if you're trying to get like-minded folks that can reference your letter, use your letter, some of the talking points maybe that you're sharing. But I would say just for simplicity, to type it out. But man, kudos, A for effort if you write the letter, absolutely.
All right, another question from Felicia Hart. She's head of EDA and tourism in Clark County. She asked, first of all, she compliments you, Chris, thank you, and asks if you would please remind everyone that a locality's comprehensive plan is state required and the public is invited to participate.
Yep. Absolutely.
Check out their local planning and zoning websites for any upcoming meeting agendas, topics, issues, so they can participate in the early stages of any projects. Any input on that, Christopher? How to do that best? Where?
Yeah, I mean, and similar to comprehensive plans, you'll even see, in Frederick County, I want to say it was a couple of months ago, they were discussing extension of sewer and water service right in the county, which was another opportunity for folks that had land in the Route 1181 sort of north corridor to go before the county and say, hey, I want my property included in the future sewer and water service area, or I don't, or I have no intention of doing so. So there are a multitude of opportunities. Absolutely, the comprehensive plans are really a great opportunity to get involved, again, especially if you've got a large tract of land adjacent to maybe where you live or the neighborhood that you're in. It does give a pretty good snapshot of going what's sort of coming, what's heading forward. Now there's different interpretations of those comp plans. You have some folks that are elected that think that's the Bible, that's the word of the Lord. That is a sort of set in stone, if you will. Where you have others that sort of use it more as like a loose guide. They don't necessarily interpret it in black and white. They think there's some gray area there, and obviously, if you have a zoning issue, a rezoning issue, and it's not in conformity with that comprehensive plan, then you have a whole separate, and I didn't necessarily mention that in my outline of the application process, but you would have basically a separate, in some localities, it can even be parallel process where you need a comprehensive plan amendment along with the rezoning application. You basically have two different, if you remember the Clorox proposal, Clorox actually needed to get a comprehensive plan amendment and get a rezoning. So you essentially have two processes that you need to get approval through. They didn't even make it through the comprehensive plan amendment phase. So, but yes, a great point. Yes, the comprehensive plans do come up every 5 years, 10 years or so. And again, public input is typically always desired from the local government folks. So absolutely, show up and weigh in. I think you're on mute, Cynthia. Everybody take a shot. You all do that? Anytime you say you're on mute, everybody's got to take a shot. No?
We can talk about having a tip jar, like a little, if you had to stay, you get $5 comes to the chamber. Right. I never started and I should have. How much value do you put into work before an issue even comes up? For example, for a public agency with funding issues, making sure that the legislators know your work well and value it.
So I mean, a great example is the state General Assembly. So I mean, most folks think that the General Assembly starts the second Wednesday of every January and goes either 45 or 60 days, and they get sort of all their ducks in a row, and they go down there to the General Assembly, and they show up on the first day, and they start lobbying on their own behalf, or on someone else's behalf. The work in the General Assembly starts in September, October. I mean, for the most part, by the first day of General Assembly session, I mean, at least 50% of everything's baked in at that point, especially if you have an issue that you're attempting to get into the governor's budget on those budget years. You've seen, even here with this special session that's coming up here in August, where they're going to be handing out $4.5 billion. I mean, just an ungodly amount of money. The governor is releasing his budget, but that work, if you were an entity who, let's say you wanted to get premium pay for your essential workers here back during COVID, you want to give everyone at your business a $1,500 bonus. I mean, folks were meeting in Richmond in mid-June. And lead up to this August special session. Folks have been jockeying to get in the governor's budget because this particular special session they're talking about only being about 2 weeks. I mean, do the math, right? $4.5 billion divided by 10 business days. I mean, that's a hell of a lot of money every single day that's going to be handed out. And really, a lot of the sort of reliance, I think the General Assembly is going to fall back quite a bit on what it is that the governor proposes. So if you can get a line in that in the governor's budget, you're sitting pretty good. It's going to be probably pretty tough. They're not going to have enough time for the most part to extract that out of the governor's budget. But General Assembly, great example. I mean, if you've got something that's going to either legislatively, regulatorily, finance-wise that you're going to be impacted by, you start that no later than mid-September, meeting with those members in the General Assembly. I mean, obviously, if you've got a piece of legislation, you need to find someone to patron it, someone to carry it. You're doing that in June, July, and August. Essentially, after the last session ends, you're starting your work on the upcoming session. But you want to start meeting with the committee members. So if you have an idea of what committee or committees that you're going to be going through, again, those meetings need to be taking place in October, November, up before the holidays, because a lot of times, you get down to Richmond. These folks in the House, I think, had 3,300 bills this past session. It's a lot of work that they're doing each and every day. If you're starting from scratch, if you're starting from the ground on that first day, you've got a mountain to climb to ensure that you're going to get anything done. So I would offer, if you're talking about something at state level, you're looking 3 months ahead. If you're talking about a local land use project, you're talking potentially years in advance. If you've got something that's going to be, fairly controversial. On the cell tower side, I mean, we've done thousands of cell tower applications across Virginia. And we typically like to get in like 6 months before that application is even submitted to staff. And that's just on something as simple as a cell tower. There's a lot more controversial stuff out there at the local level than just cell towers. At the congressional level, again, you're talking years potentially in advance. So the timeline is just extricated. It's just huge when you get up to the federal level, because again, the system, that the process you're trying to get through is just so arduous and just so difficult that you've got to start very, very early at the congressional level.
What is the best place or resource to get up-to-date contact info for the legislator, their direct staffer I think that's typically the best ear to get in, right?
So, I mean, you're going to have, Legistorm, Legistorm, Legistorm for congressional stuff. I mean, obviously, at the General Assembly website, it's great for the General Assembly. They typically have the legislative aides or chiefs of staff. If you go to Fairfax County, right? Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, they have chiefs of staff. Those are $200,000 a year jobs. They've got chiefs of staff, they've got legislative assistants. It's not the, $12,000 that the Frederick County, Board of Supervisors gets, or I'm not even sure what Clark County gets, but I mean, they are, full on staffs, even at the local level. So, I would argue, typically you'd want to reach out and start with a legislative assistant. They do all the work. I mean, we all sort of recognize that our military is fought by a bunch of kids, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, right? And it's amazing that we have the force that we do. Congress is no different. Congress is run by a bunch of 21 to about 25, 26-year-old kids, too. I can say that now because I'm in my 40s. So you'll want to reach out to and have a greater in-depth conversation with legislative aides, but you want to elevate that, especially as you get towards some of those milestones, to legislative directors, a deputy legislative director, sort of the number 2 legislative director, deputy chief of staff, and chief of staff. When you can't get to those members, you're going to get more callbacks, though. You're going to get more non-form letter responses, replies to your emails from the legislative assistants, though, no doubt. They're the ones that are sort of there, that are going to have the best communication. There's another line. There's regional representatives. So each of the senators has 5 regional representatives across the state. It's some of those are great. They typically do like reports, memos that they send to the member each week. They'll say, hey, look, I met with Cynthia Snyder and we talked about the PRO Act and she said it was horrible, and they'll include that in that memo. A lot of times though, it just kind of goes into a hole. You won't necessarily get quite a bit of feedback. Same thing with the congressional offices, although they're definitely a little bit more representative, a little bit more in touch, a little bit more responsive than the senatorial office, senators' offices are. So I would say start with a legislative assistant. Those are typically listed again on sites like Legistorm. You can find them by issue. Typically, folks will a legislative assistant might have 1 or 2 issues. They might be like transportation, and then some sort of sub, or 2 or 3 sort of sub issues, or energy. And again, 2 or 3 sub issues. They typically have 1 big issue that they cover and a couple sub issues. But I would absolutely probably start. I'll start there with them. Clark County, I see the chairman gets $3,000 and others are $2,700. I mean, That's for the love of public service right there. That's dedication.
It is. John Fox was asking whether you have any updates for us on the 37 project. Do you know anything more about it than we might know?
I from a public standpoint, from like a General Assembly VDOT standpoint, I don't have any update. I mean, I think it's our particular region is one of the lowest funded regions in the entire Commonwealth, and that's for a number of different issues. That could be a whole nother lunch and learn for the most part. But we are typically at the bottom. The Stanton district is from a VDOT standpoint. So any priorities that we have are just on the grander scale, just not really priorities at all from a VDOT standpoint. Now, from a private sector standpoint, I know there were a lot of folks. I mean, again, everyone's looking around. I mean, look at property values right now. Look at the average home. I think in Winchester, Frederick County is like $400,000. You've got a lot of large residential developers that are really interested in Frederick County. Looking at this Board of Supervisors, they would have a snowball's chance in hell of getting any of those developments probably approved because you've got more or less a board that, for the most part, is trying to slow at least residential growth here in the county. So again, you've got some really large tracts, especially when you get around over by like Snowden Bridge. You've got the pieces that would make, I think they're calling it the Northeast Corridor Connect or something. There's some sort of catchy name for it, for that sort of 1/4 segment of 37. I think you would potentially see that being developer built as part of an application. As that sort of loops around Route 7, the piece between 7 and 50 would probably have to be built with public dollars, I would imagine. But I also think, from 50 back around to sort of Stevens City, that's most likely going to be built on the backs of developers, if I had to guess. That are going to come in, want to build 5,000, 10,000 homes. They're willing to put in a couple miles of 37, maybe an interchange. I mean, if you look at Loudoun County, our firm, we really cut our teeth in Loudoun County back over the past 20 years or so. Every interchange, if you remember what Route 7 used to be, if you drove from Winchester, Tyson's Corner, it was just stoplights. There were no overpasses. All those overpasses have all been built by developers all the way north of Leesburg. Those are all developer built. Very few of those are actually built using public dollars. Prince William back in the middle 2000s got sick and tired of waiting on VDOT for the most part. Got tired of the way VDOT funded a project. So if VDOT had $100,000 and they had 10 projects in Prince William County, they would put $10,000 in each one of those silos. Instead of having, each one of those projects costs $100,000, instead of just doing and getting done one of those projects and the other 9 not getting any funding, Prince William got sort of fed up with that model. Prince William started essentially funding their own roads, building their own roads. So if you look at like 234, which is basically the bypass around Manassas, that was built using Prince William County taxpayer dollars. There was no or very, very little VDOT dollars. Of course, with a lot of help from developers and proffers and impact fees. Now, unfortunately for Frederick County, what's really changed here in Virginia, it's sort of going back and forth, is those proffers, are those impact fees. Before, again, back during Loudoun County's really sort of boom days, between developers and the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, it was just simply a negotiation. Like, you want to build that? I'm the county, I want X, Y, and Z. If you're not going to meet X, Y, and Z, then I'm not going to approve your project. Whereas now, that ability to negotiate those impact fees and those proffers is sort of going by the wayside. Legislatively at the state level, Mark Overchain filed the bill several years ago, really on behalf of the Home Builders Association, that felt that they were just getting taken to the woodshed, by places like Loudoun County, Prince William County, Fairfax County, and they basically nipped that in the bud. But still, now today, for the most part, if you're a developer, you're smart enough to know that I've got to give something if I'm going to get something. So you make a pretty hefty offer most times. For the most part, you attempt to at least overshoot maybe what you need to increase the chances of success, for approval. So I would imagine, just getting back to, I sort of got off course there with the 37 loop. I imagine a good portion of that, potentially at least, and if it is going to happen, it's probably going to be done from the private sector more than necessarily would from funding from the public sector. But who knows? We'll see. And certainly, it's getting back to sort of one of those issues as to why our region doesn't get a whole lot of, transportation funding. We've got, we're a pretty Republican issue for the most part. And let's forget about Winchester. It's only 25,000 folks. But, when you've got a Democratic governor and a Democratic state Senate and a Democratic House of Delegates, they're not really, too keen on making sure, 80-20 GOP friendly areas are getting what they necessarily need. Or at least not getting more than they need, right? Which is essentially what we're talking about here with the 37. That's kind of a wish, of ours. It's not necessarily something that we need here today. So, the politics certainly plays a little portion of it. Now, if the GOP is fortunate enough to take back the House, maybe here this cycle, maybe Glenn Youngkin gets elected, you might see, some of those priorities here in our particular region in the Stanton district maybe move up, maybe the timeline move up a little bit on those, but again, maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah. But even that one, we had a recent meeting for 81, and you're talking 5 to 8 years before we're going to even see the work begin on 81. So
Right.
I don't know that we can move any faster locally with 37, but from a statewide level for 81, just the time to do the study, get all of the right of ways in order, you could be looking at 5 to 8 years before we see any expansion there. And they were just talking, one lane on either side. So.
Yeah. You look at the overpass, at Route 50 and we're 522 North, Route 50 East, and 81 all come together. I mean, that overpass is going to be a nightmare getting that repaired. I mean, Stephen City, they've needed a new overpass for 15, 20 years. Right? I mean, that overpass has always been bad down there. But again, what are our priorities here are certainly not priorities on the grander scale at VDOT for sure, unfortunately.
Are there any other questions that you all would like to bring out? Otherwise, I have one burning question to end the day with, but I want to give the floor to anyone else that might have another question for Christopher. All right. So here's our closing question, Chris. Do you have any information on how the Triangle Diner might ever be forced to open here?
Oh my God. Yeah. Somebody was talking about the old Ruby. I saw the comments, about the old Ruby Tuesday, that someone was going to pick up the Triangle Diner and move it to the old Ruby Tuesday site.
Oh, good. We'll get that going.
I ate many a breakfast there before I, went to school at Hanley each morning. It's a shame that, that particular piece of real estate and that sort of, iconic spot, in Winchester has unfortunately been closed. I would love to see that, certainly open back up. Heck, I would be if there's anyone on here wanting to invest in bringing Enrico's back. I love Enrico's, man. I miss Enrico, so I would be all for investing in bringing Enrico's back as well. So,
well, Christopher, thank you again so much for your time with us today, for your input, guidance. Again, if any of you need to reach out to Christopher, here's his contact information. Thanks for being with us today, and have a great day doing business in the top of Virginia.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.